I am getting desperate to try and make this webcam work. It goes in and out of focus. I can't get the words right. But this is actually a good way to start with a reading from Arthur Schopenhauer. There he is. Okay. Well, you probably don't know who he is. He's the ancestor of Nietzsche. Lived, I think, around the time of Goethe, a little bit after, inherited Goethe's thoughts, and then twisted them into his own. Now, you don't think he has anything to do with you. I know you don't. But I'm going to see if I can convince you at least to, what? Consider his point of view. And I'll read a couple of pages, we'll see how the time goes, and maybe make a few comments. So this is from the beginning, on the suffering of the world. If the immediate and direct purpose of our life is not suffering, then our existence is the most ill-adapted to its purpose in the world. For it is absurd to suppose that the endless affliction of which the world is everywhere full, and which arises out of the need and distress pertaining essentially to life, should be purposeless and purely accidental. Each individual misfortune, to be sure, seems an exceptional occurrence. But misfortune in general is the rule. I know this is not going to be very good for Americans. We don't do very good with mortality and decay until the mortality comes home and we start decaying. Yes, and all our friends start dying around us. No, it's going to happen. Sorry. Just as a stream flows smoothly on, as long as it encounters no obstruction, so the nature of man and animal is such that we never really notice or become conscious of what is agreeable to our will. If we are to notice something, our will has to have been thwarted, has to have experienced a shock of some kind. On the other hand, all that opposes, frustrates, and resists our will, that is to say, all that is unpleasant and painful, impresses itself upon us instantly, directly, and with great clarity. And that's what the fellow who wrote Is There Life After High School maintained. That high school, because it's a high-stress situation, and we're very anxiety-ridden the whole time, it imprints itself upon us in ways that other times in our life may not. Just as we are conscious not of the healthiness of our whole body, but only of the little place where the shoe pinches, so we think not of the totality of our successful activities, but of some insignificant trifle or other which continues to vex us. The negative, on this fact is founded what I have often before drawn attention to: the negativity of well-being and happiness in antithesis to the positivity of pain. I therefore know of no greater absurdity than the absurdity which characterizes almost all metaphysical systems, that of explaining evil as something negative. For evil is precisely that which is positive, that which makes itself palpable, and good, on the other hand, i.e., all happiness and all gratification, is that which is negative, the mere abolition of desire and extinction of pain. This is also consistent with the fact that, as a rule, we find pleasure much less pleasurable, pain much more painful than we expected. A quick test of the assertion that enjoyment outweighs pain in this world, or that they are in any rate balanced, would be to compare the feelings of an animal engaged in eating another with those of the animal being eaten. The most effective consolation in every misfortune and every affliction is to observe others who are more unfortunate than we. And everyone can do this. But what does that say for the condition of the whole? History shows us the life of nations, and finds nothing to narrate but wars and tumults. The peaceful years appear only as occasional brief pauses and interludes. So, peace is really just an intermission between the real activity. In just the same way, the life of the individual is a constant struggle, and not merely a metaphorical one against want or boredom, but also an actual struggle against other people. He discovers adversaries everywhere, lives in continual conflict, and dies with sword in hand. Okay, here's a bit on time. Not the least of the torments which plague our existence is the constant pressure of time, which never lets us so much as draw breath, but pursues us all like a taskmaster with a whip. It ceases to persecute only him it has delivered over to boredom. Boredom. I've been reading a lot about boredom. And Daniel Borstein, in The Image, his book about the United States and how we live in this kind of fairy tale land of images, says that boredom is our most constant state of being. That the regularity, that the luxury, even the poorest don't live like the poor in India. I'm not excusing it, but that's the truth. We're just aching with boredom. So, this leads to all kinds of things like our continual conflicts in the world, and our need for drama on television, and our need for drama in our personal lives. Everything must become important because it's so pointless. And yet, just as our body would burst asunder if the pressure of the atmosphere were removed from it, so would the arrogance of man expand, if not to the point of bursting, then to that of the most unbridled folly, indeed madness, if the pressure of want, toil, calamity, and frustration were removed from their life. One can even say that we require, at all times, a certain quantity of care or sorrow or want, as a ship requires ballast, in order to keep on a straight course. Work, worry, toil, and trouble are indeed the lot of almost all men in their whole life long. And yet if every desire were satisfied as soon as it arose, how would men occupy their lives? How would they pass the time? Imagine this race, transported to a utopia, where everything grows of its own accord, and turkeys fly around ready roasted. Where lovers find one another without any delay, and keep one another without any difficulty. In such a place, some men would die of boredom, or hang themselves. Some would fight and kill one another, and thus they would create for themselves more suffering than nature inflicts on them as it is. Thus, for a race such as this, ours, of course, no stage, no form of existence is suitable other than the one it already possesses. And it's interesting that they always say you learn the most